My husband ran off with his mistress, leaving me with $200,000 in debt, but he didn't realize that my quiet, smiling father had the most terrifying way of getting revenge. That day was no different from any other exhausting Tuesday. My back felt like it was about to snap after 8 hours in an office chair whose cushion had long since surrendered. I drove home with simple hopes, a hot shower, reheating the leftover mac and cheese, and listening to my husband, Ryan, complain about his insufferable boss. The image of that peaceful evening was so vivid in my head as I turned the key in the lock of our condo. But hope and reality rarely see eye to eye, and tonight, reality slapped me across the face. Hard. Before I could even kick off my work heels, an unnerving silence greeted me. It was a cold, empty quiet, like stepping into a model home at a real estate showing. The living room lights were off. Ryan was usually sprawled on the couch by now, watching the evening news or playing games on his phone. At first, I tried to be optimistic. Maybe he fell asleep. Maybe he ran down to the corner store for beer or snacks. But a wife's instinct is sharper than a private investigator's, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. My eyes landed on the shoe rack by the door. It looked strange, with a gap that was far too wide. Ryan's expensive new sneakers, the ones he bought last month, were gone. Not only that, but his favorite leather loafers, the ones he wore to impress the neighbors at the annual block party, had also vanished. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of panic. I dropped my purse on the floor and walked quickly toward the master bedroom, praying I was mistaken, that maybe he was just cleaning all his shoes on the back patio, even though I knew he was the laziest man on earth when it came to chores. The sight in the bedroom made my knees buckle, as if my bones had turned to jelly. Our closet was wide open, revealing Ryan's side to be completely empty. A few plastic hangers swayed gently in the breeze from the slightly open window. His work shirts, his designer jeans, his prized leather jacket all gone without a trace. What made me want to laugh hysterically in the middle of my panic was the fact that he'd also taken his favorite memory foam neck pillow. Imagine that. In the middle of abandoning his wife, he still had the presence of mind to ensure his neck would be comfortable on the journey. The priorities on this man were truly something else. I ran to the bathroom. Sure enough, his toothbrush, his electric razor, even his ridiculously expensive face wash that cost more than my entire month's worth of skincare, all gone. Ryan was really gone. He hadn't been abducted by aliens. He wasn't on a sudden business trip. He had left me. But the real gut punch was yet to come. The main event was waiting for me patiently on the dining room table, ready to shatter my world into a million pieces. The table was too neat, except for 2 items lying in the center, a single sheet of handwritten paper and a thick, brown envelope with the logo of a major bank. My hand trembled as I reached for the note. It felt like holding a ticking time bomb. Ryan's familiar, messy scrawl stared back at me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my constricted lungs, and began to read the final message from the man who had slept beside me for 5 years. The letter was short, blunt, and excruciatingly painful, as if he'd intentionally chosen the words that would cut the deepest. He wrote that he wasn't happy with me anymore, that I was too rigid and boring. He said he deserved to chase his own happiness, and that happiness, according to his letter, was a woman named Mona. The name was foreign to me, but apparently it was very familiar to my husband's heart. He said he was starting a new life with Mona somewhere far away, a place I'd never find him. At the end of the letter, he wrote the sentence that made my blood boil. "Sorry, I can't carry any baggage from the past. You can handle the rest." My eyes burned, but tears wouldn't fall. Shock was still overpowering the grief. My gaze shifted to the thick brown envelope. With a violent tug, I tore it open. Out spilled several official-looking documents, their bank letterhead looking incredibly intimidating. I scanned the lines of text and numbers until my vision locked on one figure printed in bold, $200,000. It was the outstanding balance on a business loan, past due, complete with interest and late fees that made the number even more astronomical. My world started spinning like a malfunctioning carousel that wouldn't stop. $200,000 in my name. How? Then my memory flashed back to about 6 months ago. Ryan came home with takeout from my favorite restaurant, acting unusually sweet. He massaged my shoulders and presented me with a thick stack of papers. He said it was just a formality for a small business loan, for a little side hustle he was planning. And like an idiot, I believed him. I signed the pillow-thick stack of documents without reading them, because I trusted my husband. It turned out that my signature that day was my consent to my own ruin. A wave of nausea hit me, a combination of an empty stomach and the sudden, crushing stress. I sank into a dining chair, staring blankly at the number. My salary as an administrative assistant was just enough to cover the mortgage and utilities. It would take me decades to pay off a debt like that, and that's if I never ate or drank again. Ryan hadn't just left with my heart and my dignity. He'd left with my future, digging a deep hole and forcing me to jump in. The funny thing is, amidst this emotional storm, my eyes caught something else missing from the kitchen. The fancy new air fryer I'd bought with my year-end bonus was gone. He took the air fryer. The man ran off with his mistress, a mountain of debt, and he still felt the need to take the damn air fryer. Was he planning on making romantic, crispy chicken wings for Mona with his abandoned wife's appliance? Honestly, if the situation weren't so horrifying, I would have laughed at how petty and cheap he was. My hands still shaking, I grabbed my phone, dialing Ryan's number with the foolish hope this was all some sick joke. A prank in horribly bad taste, no dial tone. Just the automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I tried again and again, until my thumb ached, but the result was the same. He'd thrown the number away, just like he'd thrown me away. Panic began to creep up my spine, twisting into a fear that choked me. Images of debt collectors, of foreclosure notices, of being evicted, danced in my head. I'd seen stories on the news about how ruthless they could be. And now, I was the star of that horror film. This condo, the one we'd put a down payment on together, though most of it was my savings, was the collateral. Soon, I wouldn't just be a broke, cheated-on wife, I'd be a homeless one. The complete misery package, all delivered in a single evening. The tears I'd been holding back finally broke free, streaming down my face and dripping onto the loan statement, smudging the ink. I cried my heart out in that empty dining room, screaming at God, asking why my life had turned out like this. What did I do wrong? I tried to be a good wife. I wasn't demanding. I was frugal. I rarely even asked for expensive makeup, and my reward was a betrayal of epic proportions from the person I trusted most. The pain was immense, worse than stubbing your pinky toe on a coffee table, multiplied by 1,000. The wall clock read 9 p.m., but the silence made it feel like the middle of the night. After crying until my eyes were swollen shut, I started to think a little more clearly. I couldn't stay here. This place wasn't safe anymore. The bank's collectors would come soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. I needed a sanctuary, a place where I could think without fearing a loud knock on the door. My father's face suddenly appeared in my mind. My dad, Arthur, who lived alone in the small town of Havenwood, Wisconsin, ever since Mom passed away. My relationship with Dad was fine, but Ryan couldn't stand him. Ryan always said Dad was an old-fashioned, small-town hick who wasn't on the same level as his sophisticated city lifestyle. Because of that, I hadn't visited Dad much in the last 2 years, just to avoid fighting with Ryan. Now, guilt wormed its way into my heart. I'd neglected my own father for a man who had just neglected me. Life's irony can be a cruel joke, but would Dad even want me? His foolish daughter, coming home only when she was completely broken. I was terrified of disappointing him. He was always so proud of me, working in the city, having a husband. If I showed up with news of a divorce and a $200,000 debt, I was afraid his heart couldn't take it, but I had no other choice. My friends in the city were all struggling with their own lives and families. I couldn't possibly burden them with a problem this big. Dad's house was the only place whose door was never locked for me. With what little energy I had left, I dragged an old suitcase from the storage closet, the same dusty suitcase I used when I first moved to Chicago, full of hope. Now, I would use it to escape the city that had chewed me up and spit me out. I started throwing my clothes in haphazardly. No neat folds, I just needed them in the bag. I grabbed my important documents, my diploma, birth certificate, and my depressingly empty bank book. I didn't want to leave anything of value behind. As I packed, my eyes fell on our wedding photo hanging on the bedroom wall. In it, Ryan was smiling broadly, looking so sincere. I was looking at him with pure adoration. Lies. It was all a lie. That smile was fake. In one swift motion, I took the frame down and smashed it on the floor. The sound of shattering glass broke the night's silence, bringing a small, bitter satisfaction to my heart. Let it be broken. The marriage was shattered. Why should the photo remain intact? After packing, I stood in the living room, looking around one last time. This condo held so many memories, from when we first moved in and slept on an air mattress to celebrating anniversaries with cheap grocery store cake. Now, it felt like the mouth of a monster, ready to swallow me whole. My chest tightened as I realized I had to abandon the fruits of my hard work because of one heartless person. I grabbed my car keys. It was my only real asset, thankfully in my name, with the title tucked away in a secret drawer Ryan didn't know about. At least he hadn't taken my car, probably because he knew the old thing often overheated. So be it. This beat-up old sedan would be my getaway chariot tonight, taking me to my father's castle. I locked the front door tightly, as if sealing all the bad memories inside. The cold night air hit my face, helping to cool my overheated brain. I got in the car, threw my suitcase in the back, and started the engine. The car's roar was rough, matching my mood. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. I didn't know how I would pay off $200,000. I didn't know how to explain any of this to my dad. All I knew was that I had to leave. Now. I stepped on the gas, leaving the dark condo behind me. Tears fell again, but this time, I just let them flow. The drive to Havenwood would take about 4 hours, plenty of time to cry it all out before I had to put on a brave face for my father. Goodbye, Ryan. Goodbye, Mona. And goodbye, debt. Well, the debt would probably still follow me. But tonight, at least, I was running. I was choosing to go home, to a place where I was once a little girl without a care in the world. Home to the one man who would never, ever hurt me. Home to Dad. The interstate that night felt endless, stretching out like a dark tunnel, forcing me to replay every foolish moment of the last 5 years. A light rain began to fall, blurring my windshield. The wipers, which I'd meant to replace last month, squeaked pathetically. I hadn't replaced them because the money went to a new pair of running shoes for Ryan. The irony was suffocating. The very shoes I bought him were now being used to run away from me. My old car, which I affectionately called the Beast for its loud engine and slow acceleration, struggled against the wind. The AC had been broken for years, so I had to crack the window open. A cold, damp wind whipped against my face, but that chill was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. I kept the radio off. The only concert I needed was the one I was performing myself, a solo of sobs and sniffles. I'd cry for a bit, take a breath, and then start again when I remembered the credit card bill for a new pan set, now dwarfed by a $200,000 loan. Around mile marker 50, the Beast started to sputter, the engine coughing like it was protesting this late-night journey. I patted the steering wheel frantically. Come on, old girl, don't die on me now. We're on a mission to save my dignity. A little cooperation, please. I pleaded with the hunk of metal. Miraculously, the Beast seemed to understand and sputtered back to life, chugging along with the sound of an asthmatic wheeze. I decided to pull over at a rest stop. My eyes were too swollen, my vision blurry. I needed some water and a dose of sanity. I parked in a dim corner, too embarrassed for anyone to see my face, which probably looked like a washed-out ghost. Rummaging in the glove compartment for a tissue, my fingers brushed against a small, crinkled piece of paper. Curious, I turned on the dim cabin light. It was a receipt, dated just last week. My eyes widened as I read the name of the store, a high-end jeweler downtown. And the amount, my God, the amount made my eyes want to pop out of my head. $1,500. Ryan had bought a white gold necklace for $1,500. My chest constricted again. Just last week, I'd asked him for $20 to buy some hair vitamins because my hair was falling out from stress. He'd claimed he was short on cash, that we needed to be frugal for our future. It turned out the future he was investing in was Mona's elegant neck, while his wife had to make do with drugstore shampoo. He bought his mistress a necklace worth more than a month of my salary. The puzzle pieces in my head started snapping into place with brutal clarity. No wonder he'd been coming home late, claiming he was working overtime to meet quarterly targets. No wonder he was always smiling at his phone, saying it was just a funny group chat from work. He was building a love nest on the foundation of my misery, and I was naively making him tea and giving him back rubs, feeling sorry for how hard he was working. He wasn't tired from work, he was tired from shopping sprees with Mona. I was the biggest fool in the entire country. After chugging half a bottle of water and splashing my face in a restroom that smelled faintly of despair, I got back on the road. The smooth asphalt of the interstate eventually gave way to the cracked, two-lane roads of the countryside. Streetlights grew sparse, replaced by the deep darkness of the woods on either side. As I got closer to Havenwood, my phone signal flickered in and out, much like my relationship with Ryan had. Good, I thought. At least no calls from unknown numbers could get through for a while. Havenwood was nestled in rolling hills with cool air and rich soil. I used to complain about how quiet it was, always begging to move to the city. Now, that silence was all I craved. I wanted to hide in the morning mist and pray my problems couldn't find me here. The sky was beginning to glow with hints of orange as the beast finally rolled into the town limits. Roosters crowed, welcoming my arrival. The sight of green fields and morning dew on the leaves brought a sliver of peace. The town was already stirring. A few men with tools headed towards their farms. Women walked towards the small town square market. They all looked so calm, living their lives without the weight of a $200,000 debt. I was intensely jealous. My car turned slowly into the gravel driveway of an old, sturdy-looking farmhouse at the end of a dirt road. That was Dad's house. The yard was large, filled with my late mother's flower beds and a vegetable garden. Nothing had changed, except the big oak tree out front was even bigger. I killed the engine. The silence was immediate, broken only by the cheerful chirping of sparrows. It was a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I didn't get out right away. I just sat behind the wheel, staring at the front door, which was still closed. A fresh wave of fear washed over me. How do I even start? "Hey, Dad, how's it going? Oh, by the way, Ryan left me. I have a debt the size of a new house, and can I have some breakfast?" No, I couldn't say that. Dad had high blood pressure. If I was that blunt, I might end up sending my own father to the hospital. I glanced at the rearview mirror. My reflection was horrifying. Swollen eyes, smeared mascara that made me look like a sleep-deprived raccoon, and tangled hair. I tried to fix it with my fingers, but it was a lost cause. Suddenly, the front door opened. An older man in flannel pajama pants and a loose white t-shirt came out, holding a mug of coffee. It was Dad. His hair was completely white, but he still looked strong for his age. He took a sip of his coffee, looking up at the morning sky. Then his gaze fell and stopped on my car. He squinted, probably recognizing the beast, or maybe just wondering why a piece of junk was parked in his driveway at the crack of dawn. My heart skipped a beat as our eyes met through the windshield. He didn't look overly surprised. He just set his mug down on the porch railing and started walking slowly towards my car, his steps unhurried, as if his distraught daughter showing up at dawn was the most natural thing in the world. I opened the car door with a trembling hand. My feet felt disconnected from the ground as I stepped out. The smell of damp earth and Dad's coffee filled the air. I wanted to smile, to say hello, but my throat was tight. All my defenses crumbled the moment I saw his gentle, wrinkled face. "Dad," was all I could manage to say, my voice raspy and broken. He didn't ask, "Why are you here?" or "Where's your husband?" He just looked me over from head to toe, saw the suitcase in the back seat, saw my wrecked face, and somehow he seemed to understand everything without a single word of explanation. A father's intuition, I guess, is sharper than any detective's. "You're finally home," he said softly, his voice as calm as a flowing river. "Come on inside. I just made some roasted potatoes. They're still warm." That was it. No interrogation, no anger, just an offer of roasted potatoes. And strangely, that simple sentence was what made the dam of my tears break all over again. I threw myself into his arms, sobbing out all the pain, exhaustion, and fear onto his thin but solid shoulders. In that embrace, I felt safe. Even though I knew that outside this peaceful bubble, a $200,000 storm was still waiting for me. But for this morning, at least, I had roasted potatoes, and I had my dad. My dad's roasted potatoes were plain, just seasoned with a little salt and pepper, but each bite felt like the world's most powerful tranquilizer. I sat cross-legged on the wooden porch swing, looking out over a field of young corn. The sun was higher now, its warmth doing little to soothe my puffy face. In my lap was an old ceramic plate piled with steaming potatoes. Dad sat in his favorite rocking chair nearby, sipping his black coffee with the serenity of a Zen master. The peace of this place was so profound it felt rude to shatter it with stories of infidelity and debt. Chickens pecked at the ground, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tall oak, and the soft creak of the porch swing was a kind of therapy. It was the complete opposite of my mind, which felt like a chaotic, burning flea market. I watched my father from the side, his weathered skin, tanned by years under the sun. His calloused hands, a testament to a life of hard work, his old t-shirt with a tiny hole near the shoulder. Looking at this simple man, my chest tightened with guilt. For years, I had let Ryan look down on him. I remembered every excuse Ryan made to avoid visiting Havenwood. He was allergic to dust, he couldn't sleep without air conditioning, he hated the well water. Once, he was forced to come for a family reunion and spent the entire day in the car with the engine running because he didn't want to get bitten by farm mosquitoes. Ryan always said, "Clara, your dad is a sweet guy, but he's from another time. He doesn't understand business or how modern people live. Just look at his house, it's ancient." And I just swallowed those words, prioritizing my marriage's fragile peace over defending my own father. Now look who came out on top. The modern man ran off with his wife's money, while the old-timer took in his foolish daughter without a single question. I wanted to slap my past self. "So," Dad's deep voice broke my train of thought, startling me so much I almost dropped my plate. He didn't look at me, his eyes still on the birds at the feeder. "That Ryan fella. When's the last time he came home?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. I set my plate down. It was time for confession. I took a deep breath of clean country air, hoping it would give me courage. "He's not coming home again, Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's gone. He left me." Dad's rocking chair paused for a second, then resumed its steady rhythm. "Gone where? Another business trip? Or is he meeting with investors on Mars this time?" I managed a weak, bitter smile. Dad had always known Ryan's excuses were flimsy, but he never called him out on it in front of me. "Not a business trip. He left with another woman. Her name is Mona. He said he found a new happiness he couldn't get from me." Silence, broken only by the chirping of a blue jay. I braced myself for his reaction. For him to get angry, to slam his coffee mug down, or at least curse Ryan's name. But Dad remained calm, as if I'd just told him the price of corn had gone up a few cents. "Oh," he grunted. "Good." My eyes widened. "Good? What's good about it? Your daughter just got abandoned and cheated on, and you say good?" He turned his head slowly, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Good. It means the trash took itself out. You don't have to waste your energy sweeping it out the door. God works in mysterious ways, Clara. He separated you from the wrong person before you got any older, and it got any harder to run." His words hit me. He was right, but the problem wasn't just a broken heart. It was the gaping hole Ryan had left in my finances and my future. This was the hardest part to say. My tongue felt heavy. "But that's not the only problem, Dad," I said, looking down, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. I couldn't look him in the eye for this part. He didn't just leave. He took all of our savings, and worse, he left me a very expensive souvenir. "He left you with a child?" Dad asked, a note of concern finally entering his voice. No, Dad. A child I could handle. He left me with debt. Debt for what? A credit card? A car payment? He asked, his tone relaxing again. I shook my head, tears welling up again. No, it's a business loan from a bank. It's huge. The condo was the collateral. If I don't pay it, they'll foreclose and I'll be in legal trouble. My signature is on everything. Dad set his coffee mug down. This time, he turned his whole body to face me. His expression was serious. How much? That one question hung in the air. How much? A number so large that just saying it made my stomach churn. In this town, a few $1,000s was a fortune. People here worked the fields for months for a fraction of that. How could I tell him a number in the 6 figures? Dad, promise you won't freak out. I pleaded foolishly. Just say it, Clara. I'm an old man. My heart's been trained by the neighbor's dog who likes to bark at 3 a.m. It can take a shock, he said flatly. I closed my eyes, summoning what little courage I had left. $200,000, Dad. And that's not including the interest and penalties for late payment. Silence again. A long, heavy silence. I didn't dare open my eyes. I imagined him clutching his chest or maybe looking for a stick to hit me with for my stupidity. $200,000 could buy acres of farmland here. It could buy a whole herd of cattle. And that money was gone, being spent by Ryan and Mona on God knows what, while I sat here eating potatoes with $200,000 worth of tears. $200,000. Dad repeated slowly. His voice wasn't high, nor was it low. I nodded weakly, my eyes still shut tight. I'm so sorry, Dad. I was so stupid. I signed without reading. Now I have nothing. The condo will be gone. I'll have to sell the car, and I'll just be a burden on you. I'm so ashamed, Dad. So ashamed. My sobs broke free again. Guilt, shame, fear, it all spilled out onto that wooden porch. I felt like the world's biggest failure. I barely visited, and when I finally came home, I brought disaster with me. I was ready for him to tell me to leave. I deserved it. But what happened next was completely unexpected. I didn't hear yelling. I didn't feel a stick. What I heard was a long, satisfied slurp of coffee, followed by a sigh of contentment. Ah. This morning's coffee is particularly good, he said. My eyes flew open. I stared at him, bewildered. My face must have looked ridiculous, tear-streaked and slack-jawed, gawking at a man who just heard his daughter was in a life-ruining amount of debt, but was instead critiquing his coffee. Was he in shock? Had he gone senile? Did his hearing aid malfunction and he thought I said $200? He gave me a small smile, seeing my confusion. He picked up a piece of potato, peeled it methodically, and chewed it slowly. Eat your potatoes, Clara. They're no good cold, he said casually. You always did make an ugly face when you cry. Look just like a wet cat. Dad, did you hear me? I protested, half crying, half exasperated. I have a $200,000 debt. The bank is going to come after us. We could. He held up a hand, silencing me. The gesture was calm but authoritative, and I instinctively shut my mouth. He looked me straight in the eye, his gaze deep and reassuring. Listen, kiddo, he said softly. That's a lot of money if you're buying groceries. But for my daughter's dignity, it's cheap. I gaped at him. What did that even mean? Finish your potatoes, then go take a shower. You smell like stress and old car exhaust, he continued, getting up from his chair. He stretched, his back cracking audibly. I'm gonna go check on the goats. Don't you worry about that money. Just consider it the most expensive tuition you've ever paid for a life lesson. He walked off the porch, slipping on his worn-out work boots. Before he disappeared around the side of the house, he glanced back, a mysterious smile on his face I'd never seen before. It wasn't the smile of a confused or defeated man. It was the smile of someone holding a royal flush in a poker game, a hidden, triumphant smile. $200,000? He muttered to himself with a small chuckle, as if it were a funny morning joke. That Ryan, he has no idea who he's playing with. I was left alone on the porch with 1,000 questions. My father, this simple farmer, why was his reaction so calm? Did he not grasp the danger, or was there something about him I never knew? All I knew was that the potato in my hand suddenly tasted a little sweeter, and the mountain of debt on my shoulders, while not gone, felt just a little bit lighter, lifted by the frail-looking back of my father as he walked away to feed his goats. Waiting for a bomb to go off is far more agonizing than the explosion itself. At least, that's how I felt for the next 24 hours. Since my tearful confession on the porch, I'd been living like a fugitive hiding in a foxhole. Every time a truck rumbled down the road, my heart leaped into my throat, terrified it was a team of debt collectors who had tracked me to this remote corner of Wisconsin. It was probably just the mailman. My phone had become the scariest object in the world. It buzzed and rang incessantly, a chorus of unknown numbers with Chicago area codes. They seemed to be taking turns, a relentless assault on my sanity. I didn't have the courage to answer. I could only stare at the glowing screen, cold sweat beading on my forehead, and let it go to voicemail, only for it to ring again 5 seconds later. It was like being haunted by a ghost that wanted money instead of revenge. While I was trembling in the living room, my dad acted like he didn't have a care in the world. His routine was so infuriatingly normal. In the morning, he was busy whistling and cleaning out the bird feeder. In the afternoon, he napped in his recliner, his gentle snores harmonizing with the wind chimes. In the evening, he swept the porch, cheerfully waving at every neighbor who passed. I watched him from the window, torn between awe at his zen-like composure and irritation that he didn't seem to grasp the severity of the situation. Doesn't he realize his daughter could go to jail? I screamed internally. Does he not remember that the down payment for that condo came from his retirement savings? That evening, the terror hit its peak. My phone buzzed not with a call, but with a rapid-fire succession of text messages. Ping, ping, ping. The sound was deafening in the quiet house. I forced myself to look at the notifications. The words made my blood run cold. We know you fled. Legal proceedings have been initiated. We will be visiting the address on your driver's license. And your parents' address. My knees went weak. They knew. They knew about my dad. They were going to come here, cause a scene, and humiliate him in front of the whole town. The image of my dad, a respected man in this community, being yelled at by aggressive strangers, made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't be the child who brought shame to her childhood home. I ran to the backyard where Dad was feeding his chickens. They clucked happily, oblivious to the fact that their owner's daughter was on the verge of a complete mental breakdown. "Dad," I called out, my breath coming in ragged gasps. He turned, a handful of corn feed in his hand. "What is it, Clara? Did you get chased by a bee again like when you were 6? "It's not a bee, Dad. It's worse than a swarm of hornets," I cried, shoving my phone in his face. "Look at this. They're threatening to come here. They're taking legal action. What are we going to do? Should we call the police? Should we run and hide in the woods? Do you know a wizard who can erase memories?" Dad didn't even glance at the screen. He gently pushed my hand away and scattered the rest of the corn on the ground. He wiped his hands on his worn-out jeans. "Put that thing away," he said calmly. "But Dad, they're coming. Don't you hear me? I'm scared they'll embarrass you. I'm scared you'll get in trouble because of me." Tears started streaming down my face again. I hated being such a crybaby, but this was too much. Dad walked over to the outdoor spigot, washed his hands, and dried them on a small towel hanging from a nail. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. Then he walked over to me, still sniffling by the chicken coop. He looked at me. His old eyes, usually twinkling with humor, were now as deep and calm as a mountain lake. He placed his warm, calloused hands on my shoulders. His grip was firm, sending a strange, grounding energy through my trembling body. "Clara," he said, his voice firm. I looked up at his weathered face. "Do you trust me?" I nodded hesitantly. "I do, but—" "No buts," he cut me off. "Listen to me. As long as I am breathing, as long as my feet are on this land, no one is going to touch a single hair on my daughter's head. Not the bank, not a debt collector, not the police, and especially not that good-for-nothing Ryan. "But the debt is $200,000. Where will we get the money?" "Are you going to sell the farm?" "Please don't. This is Grandpa's land. Are you going to borrow from a loan shark?" "Dad, no. That's just digging a deeper hole." I babbled, my mind racing through every disastrous scenario. Dad let out a short, hearty laugh. He patted my cheek gently. "Your imagination always did run wild. Who said anything about selling land or kidneys? My kidneys are old and tough. Wouldn't get much for 'em anyway," he joked. Then his expression turned serious again, but this time that mysterious, knowing smile played on his lips, the same smile that gave me chills but also made me feel impossibly safe. He leaned in a little closer. "Clara, listen to me. That money is just a number on a piece of paper. Paper can be torn. Paper can be burned. You stop worrying. You stop being afraid. Tonight, you're going to get a good night's sleep, and you're going to eat a real dinner. Your cheeks are getting hollow." He paused, his eyes glinting. "I'll handle it." Those 3 words, "I'll handle it." They sounded impossible. How could a retired farmer whose biggest excitement was listening to the radio handle a 6-figure debt overnight? My logic screamed that it was impossible, but the tone of his voice, it wasn't a boast. It was a promise, a certainty, like when he'd say it was going to rain, and the next day, it would pour. "Dad, are you serious?" I whispered. "More serious than when I told your mother her casserole was too salty," he replied with a wink. "Now, go on, turn off your phone, go inside. I need to make a call to an old friend. This is grown-up business. Kids stay out of it." He turned and walked calmly toward his study, a small room at the back of the house that was always kept locked. I stood frozen by the chicken coop, watching his slightly stooped back disappear into the house. A strange warmth spread through my chest. An illogical, unshakable trust began to bloom. Maybe I was a fool for believing in miracles. But as I watched my father walk with such purpose, without a hint of fear or doubt, I felt a profound sense of peace. That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, I did exactly as he said. I turned off my phone, buried it at the bottom of a drawer, and lay down on the old, comfortable mattress in my childhood bedroom. The sound of crickets outside my window was a soothing lullaby. Before I drifted off, I could faintly hear the murmur of my dad's voice from his study. It didn't sound like the voice he used with the neighbors. It was low, firm, and authoritative, a commanding tone I had never heard in my life. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence reminded me of a general in a war movie giving orders to his troops. I must be exhausted in hearing things, I thought, pulling the quilt up to my neck. Whatever my dad was planning, whatever was going to happen tomorrow, for tonight, I chose to believe in those 3 magic words, "I'll handle it." And with that belief, I finally fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. While I was in a small Wisconsin town trying to piece my shattered heart back together over roasted potatoes, Ryan was surely feeling like the luckiest man alive in some big city. I could picture him and Mona toasting champagne glasses in a sleek, modern apartment, laughing about how easily he had fooled me. Ryan was the type of guy whose chest puffed out if he won a $10 scratch-off ticket. Right now, he probably thought he'd won the lottery. He thought his escape was a massive success, getting away with our savings and leaving me buried under a mountain of debt. Mona, his new happiness, was undoubtedly the type who was only impressed by the shine of gold. She wouldn't stick around for hard times. Ryan had taken on a $200,000 debt not to build a future, but to rent the temporary affection of a woman whose main hobby was shopping. They were probably planning a vacation, buying expensive gadgets, feeling on top of the world with their stolen money. Ryan had completely forgotten about the universal law of reaping what you sow, and he had just planted a hurricane in the wrong man's field. The atmosphere in Dad's house this morning was different. The usual relaxed vibe was replaced with a quiet, focused energy. Dad was up before dawn, not to work in the garden, but dressed in a crisp, older button-down shirt that, despite being faded, still looked distinguished on him. He wasn't fussing over his birds. Instead, I saw him in the living room, holding an old, leather-bound planner. He was writing something, his pen moving with a steady, deliberate hand, as if each stroke was a battle strategy that could not afford a single mistake. "Dad, are you going somewhere?" "You're all dressed up," I asked, bringing him a cup of hot tea. He looked up and gave me a faint smile. "Just going to meet an old friend in the county seat. A little business. You stay here. If any strangers come to the door, don't open it. They can deal with me later." I just nodded. There was a different look in his eyes today, sharp, like an eagle spotting its prey from a mile high. The face of a simple old farmer was gone. Seeing him like this, I almost felt sorry for Ryan. My husband truly had no idea he was dealing with a lion who had simply chosen to live as a house cat for the sake of peace and quiet. After Dad left in the Beast, which, strangely, started up without a single sputter, I was alone in the house. I tried to keep busy, sweeping and mopping until the old wooden floors shone, but my mind kept wandering. What was Dad really doing? What kind of old friend was he meeting? Then I remembered his locked study. Driven by an overwhelming curiosity, I went to the door. It was made of thick, solid oak. I tried the handle, locked, as always. But as I pressed my ear against the wood, I could smell the faint scent of old paper and something like typewriter oil. I recalled old town gossip from when I was a kid. People used to say my dad wasn't always a farmer, that he used to have a very important job in Washington, D.C., before he decided to retire early and move back home. I'd always dismissed it as small-town chatter, but now I was starting to think there was truth to it. Suddenly, my phone, the one I'd rescued from the drawer, vibrated, a single text message. I hesitated, then curiosity won. It wasn't from the bank, it wasn't a debt collector, it was from an unknown number, and the message was short. "Network is locked. Target is under surveillance. Awaiting further instructions, Commander." My heart nearly stopped. Commander? Who was the commander? Was this a wrong number? But why was it sent to my phone? Then I remembered, Dad had bought me this phone years ago. Was it possible he was using my line as some kind of secure channel? My head started to spin with visions of high-level conspiracies unfolding in this quiet farmhouse. It felt less like a family drama and more like a spy thriller. Meanwhile, in a bustling city, Ryan was probably sitting in an expensive cafe, feeling safe because he'd changed his number and moved. He had no idea that from the moment he walked out of our condo, unseen eyes had been tracking his every move. He didn't know that every credit card swipe he made with that loan money was being meticulously logged by people who answered to only one man, an old farmer in a remote Wisconsin town. Dad wasn't looking for a loan to pay off my debt. He was firing up the old, powerful machinery of his past life. In the county seat, he was likely sitting in an air-conditioned office, meeting with men in crisp uniforms or sharp suits who still treated him with immense respect. Men whose careers he had made, whose lives he had saved, and who were now repaying their debt to Arthur. The afternoon wore on, and my anxiety grew as I waited for Dad to return. Around 4 p.m., the familiar rumble of the Beast pulled into the driveway. I ran to the door and saw Dad get out, looking completely relaxed. He was carrying a plastic bag with a box of donuts and a bucket of fried chicken from a popular chain. "Here," he said, handing me the food with a chuckle. "Eat something good. Too many potatoes, and you'll start to look like one." "Dad, how did it go?" I asked impatiently. He just took off his boots and sat down on the porch swing. He took a donut and bit into it with satisfaction. "Everything's going according to plan. Ryan is having the time of his life. Let him." It's always best to pull someone up to the highest point before you let them fall. The crash is louder that way, and the pain is much deeper. I swallowed hard. "Dad, that text message on my phone? Are you the commander?" He burst out laughing, a genuine rolling laugh that made him choke on his donut. "Whoops, guess that message went to the wrong line. Sorry about that, kiddo. My guy must have an old number for me. Just pretend you didn't see it." Then he patted my hand. "Clara, starting tomorrow, you don't have to be afraid of your phone ringing anymore. Everything has been taken care of. Now your only job is to wait. Give it a week. Then we'll see who calls you crying." I went to bed that night with a strange mix of satisfaction and fear. I was seeing a side of my quiet father that was both terrifying and deeply comforting. I realized then that Ryan had made the biggest mistake of his life. He hadn't just betrayed his wife, he had awakened a sleeping giant who had been watching over me from afar. And the next week was going to be the most miserable of Ryan's entire existence. I pulled up the covers, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled before falling asleep. Enjoy your party, Ryan, I thought, because the real bill is coming, and your father-in-law is the one serving it. If the world were a stage, Ryan was currently strutting around like the star of the show, completely unaware that the floorboards beneath him had been sawed through. In the first week after he left, he lived like a king. From the reports that somehow found their way to my father's breakfast table each morning, I learned that my husband had rented a luxury apartment in a high-rise with monthly rent that could pay for a college education. He was burning through that loan money as if it were endless. Mona, his so-called new happiness, was also relishing her role as queen for a season. They were spotted in high-end malls, carrying shopping bags from brands whose names I could barely pronounce. Ryan felt powerful, lavishing Mona with a luxury he'd never offered me. He was oblivious to the fact that this luxury was built on quicksand. He thought by changing his number and moving to a new city, he was safe from the bank. He forgot that above the bank, there are people who can make the bank bend to their will. Back in Havenwood, Dad had returned to his normal routine, or at least it appeared that way. He watered his plants, fed the chickens, and occasionally went fishing in the creek behind the house. But I knew this was the calm before the storm. Every night, he would disappear into his study for an hour. From outside, I could hear the clacking of an old typewriter, a sound that harmonized with the chirping crickets, a symphony that sounded like a judge's gavel. He was typing out a new fate for Ryan, and all I could do was wait. "Clara, see that tomato plant?" Dad said one afternoon as we sat on the porch. He pointed to a plant that was heavy with red fruit, but had a fat green hornworm munching on one of its leaves. "That worm thinks he's having the feast of his life. He's so busy eating the best leaves, he doesn't see the wasp that's been circling him all morning. He's too focused on his meal to look up." I just smiled grimly at his analogy. "But the wasp hasn't gotten him yet, Dad. What if it's too late?" Dad sipped his iced tea slowly. "That wasp is never late, Clara. It's just waiting for the worm to get a little fatter. Makes for a better meal. By tomorrow, that worm will be gone." He was right. The next day, the game began. As soon as the sun was up, Dad told me to turn on my phone. I hesitated, but he just gave me a firm nod. When the screen lit up, there were no more threatening messages from the bank, no more calls from aggressive collectors. Instead, there was a single, formal email from the bank stating that the entire debt in my name had been acquired by a third-party entity, and my account was now considered clear of all legal obligations. I almost dropped my phone. "Dad, what does this mean? Is the debt paid off? How did you pay for it?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dad just chuckled, polishing a small piece of wood. "I didn't pay with money, Clara. I just cashed in an old favor I was owed by the bank's founder. That debt isn't your problem anymore. It's been transferred to let's just say, a private investment firm that has much more creative ways of collecting." In the city, Ryan's world began to crumble. He was at a fancy restaurant when his credit card was declined. He tried another, declined. Panicked but trying to play it cool in front of Mona, he figured it was a system error. The real shock came when they returned to their apartment and their keycards no longer worked. The building's security informed him the lease had been terminated due to an investigation into fraudulent funds. Ryan tried to call his office, hoping to get an advance on his salary, but another surprise awaited him. His boss, normally friendly, cursed him out over the phone. A meticulously detailed file on Ryan's subtle embezzlement at the company had mysteriously appeared on the CEO's desk that morning. It contained everything from photographic evidence to transaction records. In less than an hour, Ryan had lost his home, his money, his career, and his reputation. Mona, seeing the panic in Ryan's eyes, showed her true colors. The sweet, doting girlfriend turned into a block of ice. "You told me you were rich, Ryan. Why are your cards being declined? Why did you get fired?" she shrieked in the apartment lobby. For her, Ryan was just an ATM, and when the machine was out of cash, it was time to find a new one. Ryan stood on the sidewalk, stunned, watching Mona throw his suitcase out of a taxi before speeding away. He had no home, no job, and worst of all, he started receiving texts from an unknown number. They weren't from the polite bank anymore. These were from people who sent him pictures of his childhood home, a photo of his mother, and a simple, chilling message. "Our money isn't free, Ryan. We know where you are." He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He was no longer being pursued by a slow-moving bank. He was being hunted by something far darker and more efficient. He tried to think of who could be doing this to him. His mind went to the wife he thought was weak, then to the father-in-law he considered a clueless old farmer. No, it couldn't be that old man, he muttered, stumbling down the street. That night, Ryan sat alone on a park bench. He was hungry but afraid to spend his last few dollars. Every time a car slowed down nearby, he jumped up and hid behind a tree. He was a rat in a maze with no exit. And far away, in a wooden farmhouse, an old man switched off his typewriter, satisfied. Dad looked at a photo of me and him with the part showing Ryan torn away and whispered into the night, "This is just the opening act, Ryan. The main event is about to begin." Watching my father from the doorway, I could only take a deep breath. There was a strange satisfaction mixed with a touch of fear. Dad had truly handled it, but in a way I could never have imagined. Ryan might be crying now, but I knew his most desperate tears were yet to come. I went to my room and slept soundly, knowing my hero didn't wear a cape. He wore flannel pajamas and an old white t-shirt. Ryan's life now felt like being caught between two concrete walls, slowly closing in. In just 3 days, the man who thought he was a handsome, wealthy prince had been reduced to a terrified, homeless wreck. The news that trickled into our farmhouse via my dad's phone calls was deeply satisfying. Ryan had tried to check into a cheap motel, but before he could even unpack, the police arrived to question him about the embezzlement case. The funny thing was, just as he was about to be put in a cell, someone mysteriously posted his bail. He probably thought he had a guardian angel. In reality, it was just part of Dad's script, keeping Ryan out on the streets, exposed and unprotected, so he could experience the true meaning of terror. Dad wanted Ryan to feel exactly what I felt when I first saw that loan statement, like a hunted animal with nowhere to turn. On the porch, Dad was calmly clipping his fingernails, occasionally glancing at the clock. "You know what's most terrifying for a traitor, Clara?" he asked without looking up. "It's not getting caught. It's being set free, only to find that everyone you know suddenly doesn't know you anymore. That's when the world shrinks to the size of a postage stamp." I thought of Ryan's face, probably gaunt and unshaven by now. Mona, his supposed true love, had vanished after cleaning out his wallet and taking the jewelry he'd bought her. She was a parasite, only clinging to a tree as long as it was healthy. The moment it started to rot, she moved on to a new host. The climax arrived that afternoon. I was doing laundry when the mailman's truck pulled up. He handed me a certified letter. I gave it to Dad, who opened it, read it, and then broke into a wide, triumphant grin. "This is it, Clara," he said, handing me the papers. "Official statements from the police and the bank. Your name is completely cleared. The investigation proved you were a victim of fraud and forgery. The condo is now 100% in your name, free and clear, with not a single penny of debt attached to it." I read the documents over and over, my eyes blurring with tears of relief. A wave of gratitude washed over me, so powerful I wanted to drop to my knees. The $200,000 mountain that had been crushing me had vanished, all thanks to the quiet man in front of me. "Thank you, Dad," I whispered, hugging his legs. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." He just stroked my hair gently. "You repay me by never again being a weak woman who can be fooled by a man with a sweet tongue. Now, get ready. It looks like our little worm is hungry and lost. I bet he tries to call you within the next 48 hours. He was right. That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, my phone vibrated on the table. It wasn't an unknown number. It was Ryan's old number, which he must have reactivated in desperation. I stared at it. a cocktail of rage and curiosity churning inside me. Dad, who was sipping his tea, glanced at the phone. "Answer it, Clara. Let's hear what a man who has lost his whole world sounds like. But remember, do not give him an ounce of pity. Your pity is too expensive for a man like him." I took a deep breath, steadied my racing heart, and swiped to answer. I put the phone to my ear but said nothing, waiting. "Clara? It's me, Ryan." His voice was a hoarse, trembling whisper, thick with unshed tears. The arrogant, condescending tone was gone. "Clara, please, you have to help me. I'm on the street. I have no one." Mona took everything. The bank took the apartment. My job fired me. "Please, Clara, forgive me. I made a mistake." "Mona," she influenced me. "We can start over, can't we?" I closed my eyes, feeling a profound nausea at the word mistake. A mistake is wearing mismatched socks. Forging your wife's signature for a massive loan to fund an affair is not a mistake. "Clara, say something. Why are you so quiet?" He started to sound frantic, his voice cracking. "I know you're at your dad's place. Please, tell your dad I'm sorry. I know he's behind all this. Why would he destroy my career? Clara, I'm your husband." I looked at my dad, who simply smiled and took a calm sip of his tea. I then spoke, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. "Husband? My husband died that night, Ryan. He died when he left me with $200,000 in debt and ran off with another woman," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "You are nothing to me now. And another thing, don't you ever speak my father's name with your filthy mouth. You destroyed your own life." He just sped up the process. "Clara, don't hang up, please. There are these big guys following me. They said they were sent by the commander." "Who's the commander? Please, just tell them I don't have any money." He started wailing now, a pathetic, desperate sound. I didn't answer. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I set the phone down with a firm, final click and took the deepest, most cleansing breath of my life. It felt like I had finally thrown out a piece of rotting garbage that had been stinking up my house for years. Dad put down his teacup, stood up, and patted my shoulder. "Good girl. That's my daughter. Now, let's finish those donuts from this afternoon. Tomorrow, we get to watch the final act." It seems Ryan is about to learn that running from me is harder than running from a grizzly bear. I smiled, a real, genuine smile of victory. In my father's quiet simplicity lay a power that could turn the world upside down for the sake of justice. That night, I slept better than I had in years, while somewhere out there, Ryan was probably huddled in a bus station, trembling, waiting to see what new horror the next minute would bring. Justice was being served, and I was savoring every moment of it. This morning, a strange visitor appeared in our quiet town. From the living room window, I saw a man standing at the end of our driveway, leaning against the wooden fence. His clothes, once designer labels, were now stained and rumpled. His face, once smoothly shaven and moisturized, was covered in a patchy, desperate-looking beard. His eyes were sunken, dark holes in a face pale with exhaustion. It was Ryan. He had apparently used his last few dollars to take a bus here, hoping to win me back with a pathetic display of misery. He just stood there, swaying slightly, looking like he might collapse. The few neighbors who walked by with their gardening tools gave him a wide berth, assuming he was a lost vagrant. The irony was thick. Ryan, who used to complain that the country air was unfiltered, now looked like he would kiss the very dirt he stood on if it meant getting through the gate. I just watched him, my heart a flat, calm line. There was no rage left, only a profound disgust at the sight of this man who I once thought was the center of my universe. Dad was on the side porch, sharpening an axe with a whetstone. He didn't even glance toward the road. The rhythmic shing, shing, shing of the stone against the blade was a fitting soundtrack to Ryan's suffering. "Clara, looks like you have a guest," Dad said flatly, his eyes still on the gleaming edge of the axe. "Must have forgotten the way home. Or maybe he's here to ask for a loan to buy a new spine." I walked out onto the porch and stood beside him. When Ryan saw me, his face crumpled, and he started shouting, "Clara! Clara, please, open the gate! I'm starving, Clara. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I'm so sorry. Please, forgive me." His hoarse, pleading voice was repulsive. I walked slowly towards the fence, not to open it, but to get a closer look at what a broken traitor looked like. The moment I was within a few feet, Ryan dropped to his knees in the dust. He reached a hand through the slats of the fence, trying to grab me, but I pulled back. "Please, Clara," he sobbed, dirt smudging his face. "Mona was evil. She took all my money and ran as soon as I got fired. They foreclosed on the apartment, Clara. And those men? The ones your father sent? They took everything. Please tell your father to call them off. I can't take it anymore." He wept, snot and tears mixing with the grime on his cheeks. I just stared at him blankly. "You said Mona was evil? I thought she was your new happiness, the one who was so much more fun than I was. Where's your happiness now, Ryan? Does she not want to eat roasted potatoes with us? I was wrong, Clara. I was blind. She used me," he cried, pounding his fists on the ground. "I'll change, I promise. I'll do any job here. I'll be a farmhand, a janitor, whatever you want, as long as I can be with you again. Just stop those men from following me. They told me if I don't pay back the $200,000 in 1 week, they're taking me somewhere remote, to work it off. Please, help me." Hearing the words, "work it off," I almost laughed. Dad really did have a dark sense of humor when it came to punishment. He wasn't sending Ryan to a comfortable prison cell with 3 meals a day. He'd sold the debt to people whose collection methods were far more creative and physically demanding. Suddenly, the heavy tread of work boots sounded behind me. Dad was walking over, the newly sharpened axe held loosely in his hand. Ryan saw him and began to tremble violently, his face turning ashen, as if he were looking at the Grim Reaper himself. "Sir, Mr. Arthur, please, I'm sorry," Ryan stammered, shrinking back on the ground. Dad stopped right in front of the fence, looking down at Ryan as if he were something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of his boot. Then, with a swift, powerful motion, he swung the axe down and embedded it deep into a wooden fence post. The solid thunk made Ryan yelp and scramble backward. "Ryan!" Dad's voice was low and resonant with authority. "Do you remember what you said when you asked for my daughter's hand? You said you would protect her with your life. You said you were a successful modern man. But you're just a coward who hides behind his wife's signature to fund his pathetic little affairs. I'm sorry, sir. It was a mistake." "A mistake is for accidents," Dad cut him off sharply. "What you did was a calculated, malicious act. You tried to steal my daughter's future. Did you think because I live out in the country, I was someone you could walk all over? You forgot one thing, son. The land your city is built on, the corporation you worked for, even the bank that gave you that loan, they all have roads that lead right back to my desk." Dad leaned forward, his eyes locking with Ryan's terrified gaze. "You want forgiveness? Fine. But my forgiveness has a price. You took $200,000. Now, the people who own your debt are going to collect it, drop by drop, from your sweat. You're being sent to a remote logging camp in Alaska. You'll work as a laborer until every last cent is paid off. You said you'd do any job, didn't you?" Ryan's mouth fell open. "But sir, that could take years. I won't survive." "Then you have a choice," Dad said, pulling the axe from the post. "Go back to the city and face the collectors who might break your legs, or go with my people and do an honest day's work for the first time in your life. There are only 2 options, Ryan, and neither of them involves Clara." Ryan looked at me, his eyes begging, but I just turned my back and walked into the house, leaving him to wail under the hot sun. From inside, I heard the sound of a large black SUV pulling up. That must have been the commander's men. I heard a car door open, a sharp command, and then Ryan's pathetic whimpering as he was hauled into the vehicle. I peeked through the window just in time to see the SUV drive away, leaving a thick cloud of dust in its wake. The view from my front porch was clear again. The parasite had been removed. Dad came back inside, whistling softly as if nothing had happened. He picked up his now cold coffee and looked at me. "All clean, Clara. Tomorrow, we start filing the divorce papers. Time to make you officially free from that worm." I smiled, a feeling of immense lightness washing over me. Justice didn't always come from a judge's gavel. Sometimes it came from the quiet, firm hand of a father who knew exactly how to teach a traitor the most valuable lesson of his life. The drama was over, and I was the winner. After the dust from the SUV settled, Havenwood returned to its natural state, calm, cool, and peaceful. It felt like watching an intense action movie, and then the credits rolled, and the theater lights came up, and I was back on the familiar porch of my childhood home. A week passed. I was getting used to waking up without a sense of dread, and more importantly, I could eat a meal without my stomach tying itself in knots. Dad seemed to have officially retired his commander persona. He was back to being Arthur, the guy in the faded t-shirt who fussed over his tomato plants. But his influence still lingered. This morning, the town sheriff came by, not with a problem, but with a large manila envelope. He handed it to my dad with a level of deference I'd never seen before, as if he were addressing a visiting governor. "Here are the documents, Mr. Arthur. Everything's been expedited, just like your associate in the city requested," the sheriff said with a respectful nod. Dad just nodded back casually. After the sheriff left, he handed the envelope to me. Inside was my official divorce decree, processed with astonishing speed, thanks to Dad's special channels, and the new, clean title to my condo, with only my name on it. I ran my fingers over the crisp paper, the tangible proof of my freedom. "You're not the pitiful Mrs. Ryan anymore," Dad said, thoughtfully stroking his chin. "You're Clara, a homeowner with no debt and a long future ahead of her. Don't make the same mistake again. If any man comes sniffing around, he has to pass a background check and an honesty test with me first." I laughed, a real, easy laugh. "I think I'll take a break from men for a while, Dad. I'm just going to focus on being your daughter." But I was still curious about Ryan. As if reading my mind, Dad pulled a small brown envelope from his shirt pocket and tossed it on the table. An update on the worm. My guys sent a report. Inside were a few blurry photos. In one, Ryan was standing in a vast forest of towering pines. He was wearing rough work clothes, his face dark from the sun, his hands, once soft, gripping a heavy logging tool. In another, he was sitting by a simple campfire, devouring food from a tin plate as if it were a gourmet meal. The arrogant city slicker was gone. All that was left was a man defined by pure physical exhaustion. Dad had kept his word. Ryan wasn't being tortured, but he was being forced to learn the meaning of hard work. A portion of his meager laborer's wages was being garnished to repay the debt. At this rate, it would take him 10 to 15 years to be free. A long, hard lesson in accountability. "He's doing fine," Dad said flatly. "He gets 3 meals and a place to sleep. He just doesn't have time for cheating or forging signatures. Out there, only hard work earns you respect. If you're lazy, you don't eat." Simple as that. I put the photos back in the envelope. Strangely, I felt no pity. My compassion for him had burned away that first night. I just felt a sense of closure. He was being given a chance to become a better man, albeit through the hardest path imaginable. That night, Dad and I sat on the porch, looking at the stars. He told me a little about his past, about his time as a high-level intelligence analyst for a government agency before he got tired of the politics and retired early. He talked about old friends who were now generals, bank CEOs, and corporate titans, all people who still held him in the highest regard. "Power is like that axe, Clara," he said, looking out at the dark fields. "If you swing it around for no reason, it gets dull and dangerous. But if you keep it sharp and only take it out when someone threatens your family, it will do its job perfectly." I finally understood the incredible man sitting next to me. I had mistaken his silence for weakness. I was wrong. His silence was the quiet of a dormant volcano, ready to erupt the moment his daughter's happiness was at stake. Tomorrow, I would go back to the city to reclaim my home and my life. As I packed my suitcase that night, I folded my clothes neatly, a symbol of my newly ordered life. I closed my eyes with a small smile. While Ryan was wrestling with giant logs in the Alaskan wilderness, I was here, under my father's roof, feeling lighter than air. A dark chapter of my life was closed, and my dad had given me a new pen to write the next, much brighter one. This was my last morning in Havenwood. The sun was shining, as if the universe itself was celebrating my new beginning. My packed suitcase stood by the door, ready to go. This time, my heart was beating not with fear, but with excitement. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman from the one who had arrived a month ago. My eyes were clear, my smile was genuine, and my shoulders were straight. Dad was already outside, kicking my car's tires in that old-fashioned way of checking the pressure. "Remember what I told you, Clara," he said as I came down the porch steps. "You're the driver of your own life. You decide when to hit the gas and when to brake. And if you decide to pick up any passengers, make sure they're not just looking for a free ride." I laughed and hugged him tight, a long embrace to absorb one last dose of his strength. "I promise, Dad. No more being stupid. Thank you for being my hero. Without you, I'd probably be living under a bridge right now." He patted my back. "The real hero is you, Clara. You were brave enough to come home and face the music. I just opened the door." He gave a wry smile. "As for Ryan, just forget him. Let him learn to be a man in the woods. The last I heard, he's become their hardest worker because he's terrified of missing a meal. At least I helped him find some motivation. I got into the beast and started the engine. It purred to life, as if it too felt lighter without the weight of the past. I waved as I pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw my dad standing tall by the fence, waving calmly until he was just a small figure in the distance. The drive back to the city felt short. I turned on the radio and sang along to cheesy pop songs. When I pulled up to my condo, it looked clean and peaceful, ready to welcome me home. I walked inside. The cloying scent of Ryan's cologne was gone, replaced by the fresh smell of lemon cleaner. I looked at the shoe rack. The empty space was still there, but now it symbolized freedom, not loss. I would fill it with my own shoes, bought with my own money. That night, I sat on my couch, sipping tea and scrolling through my phone. I saw a news article shared by one of Dad's anonymous sources. It was a picture of Mona, in handcuffs, being led into a police station. She was being charged with possession of stolen goods purchased with illicit funds. It turned out Dad's gifts weren't just for Ryan. Anyone who had benefited from that stolen money was getting their just desserts. I closed my phone, a feeling of complete and total satisfaction washing over me. Dad was right. Justice doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it works best in the quiet shadows. Tomorrow, I would start applying for new jobs. I had a home, a car, and most importantly, I had my self-respect back. My life had been shattered by betrayal, but thanks to a quiet old farmer from Wisconsin, I learned that any storm can be weathered if you have the courage to go home and fight back. Ryan was somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness, paying for his sins with sweat and exhaustion. But I was here, in my peaceful home, planning a future that was brighter than ever. The drama of the $200,000 debt was officially over. I turned off the lights, ready for a new day, and fell asleep with the most genuine smile I'd had in years. My life was just beginning, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that no man would ever again have the power to ruin my sleep. Thank you, Dad. I had won.